Hey guys, I'm Alex, a college student on the West Coast, and you're listening to The Board Student. I chat with college students from all over the place about their life, what they're interested in, up to, and accomplishing these days.
It's just amazing how many people go through life and never have someone who is like a friend or a pal or can back them up or who just believes in them. And that's why I think teachers are so amazing, because they just believe in people, and it makes all the difference that people believe in you.
Our guest today is full of energy. He's from Harvard University. He's currently taking a leave of absence, as they call it, to work on his entrepreneurial ventures. He's a member of the Forbes 30 Under 30. And in our chat today, we start off with what it was like growing up in a small town in Minnesota and how he handled the news that he was going to have to pay for his own college. Luke has plenty of stories of once he got into Harvard and what that was like, how supportive of a community he found there, and that supported his entrepreneurial ventures and everything. Enough from me. I hope you enjoy this chat with Luke Hein. Yeah, you grew up in Minnesota?
It's funny you start there. So yes, I grew up in northern Minnesota. I think that was just like a huge part of me becoming like who I am. I don't know what it was like in North Dakota for you, but where I was from, it was a big hockey town,
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of wacky people. It's just like a super, super great place. When you're a kid growing up, it feels so separate from the rest of the world
Mm-hmm.
that you could just kind of have the freedom to be a little weird. Because like when you do get to like a larger city, what I found is that there is anonymity with it. But with that, I think comes some freedom. Because I do think like being in a smaller town, I don't know if you experienced this, was like because everyone kind of knows what you're up to, everyone thinks they have like the best idea of you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you branch out or do new things, sometimes it can be really hard to kind of like do your own thing in those areas. You don't have the same type of anonymity or maybe like the feeling of freedom you do in a larger city. So I think the ideal is like finding a little bit of both. But luckily, I think I just like fell in with like such a good group of people
Yeah.
who were just all goons and just like fun kids and like were really cool at just like being yourself. That I think that was was a great place to grow up, especially when your job then later becomes kind of doing your own thing and being tasked with this, as all startup founders are tasked with this responsibility of, here's some capital,
Mm-hmm.
now be the multiplier, right? And like
Right.
that's essentially what your job is. So it's yeah, it's interesting. I think if you don't, if it's hard, I think, to get into that kind of mode unless you're coming from a place where you had people support you or believe in you, and that can happen in all different times of life.
Well, you ended up going to a pretty big school from Minnesota.
Totally.
Did you, was it tough leaving all your friends, or did any come with on the East Coast?
I thought it was pretty chill. So yes, so I ended up getting into Harvard, and the only reason I applied, um, so basically how it worked, the story goes, is that I was in like ninth grade, just like my first couple weeks of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom sat me down on some indoor lawn furniture, which looked good in the house. We had like this, like, it was like, look, it was looking good. Sorry, it was outdoor lawn furniture that looked good in the house. So, and she said, Luke, hey, just wanted to let my dad, I don't know where my dad was, right? My dad was like, he like dipped on this one, but he was like, mom was like, hey, Luke, like, I just want you to know that the expectation is that you're going to pay for your own education. So for me, what that meant was basically I had to do great. I had to do well in school. And it was either that or maybe joining the Air Force or doing something like that. Um, and so I went just grinded through high school. And when it came to applying to college, I applied to 20 different schools. I used that summer I had. The summer before, I worked at Wendy's, and I had written my first scholarship on a Wendy's like paper bag. And during my lunch break, drinking that horrible blue Powerade, and which is actually pretty good. Let's be honest, it's pretty good. Powerade's usually preferred. Anyway, I wrote it, and I was like, wow, this is like such a better way to make some money to afford school. I was like, I'm working for $7.15 an hour, and I could write this scholarship maybe for 500, 1,000 bucks, which then when you're an adult, you're like, okay. But like when you're a kid, that's huge.
Yeah.
So it's huge. So basically, so the following summer, I took that summer off, wrote these 20 applications, um, and wrote like 30 scholarships or something. And I always get those confused, which was which. But and yeah, and basically the whole name of the game was just a barter. So I got into a couple of schools, and luckily Harvard, I think, in part because when I was in high school, I started this Frisbee tournament that raised $1,000 for at-risk youth. I was like, this guy is like doing his own thing. He's also like working hard in school. He doesn't play hockey, but you know what? We'll take a chance at him. So when I got to here at Harvard, I actually just kind of felt like I loved it. I felt like it was kind of like taking a seed that was in like a desert kind of area and just put in like a greenhouse, because it just was like, it was just awesome. It's just like tons of opportunities, tons of diversity, tons of cool people. But when I got there, when I got to Harvard, I had two thoughts. One, I was like, wow, it is so lucky that I got in here. And the other was, wow, I really love doing that Frisbee invite. I want to do something like that again. So on the Frisbee invite, I basically spent the first year thinking about what would be cool to do. I want to run something. I want to do something that sounds fun. And that's where the idea of Summer Playbook came. So Summer Playbook was like this couch surfing for college students program that ended up being used by 400 unis in 126 countries. I think it was the biggest social network started by like a current student in the Ivy League when I was running it, which is like a really choice metric there. So like, I don't know what that means, but it was great. It was super cool. There's a lot I still meet people. I bump into people who have run it, who've used it, tens of thousands of kids. So it's fun. Wow. And then the other thing was that I was like, well, it sucks that I got so lucky finding out about financial aid. So I found out from a kid in the takeout line at a McDonald's, and from this guy named Billy Bauer. So Billy Bauer, rockstar dude, actually ended up going to Stanford. His college application strategy was, I'm going to apply to one school, which was Stanford, and he got in. His other move was to enroll in the local public university. So like, this is just like the kids we grew up with.
Yeah.
And he like, but that's just kind of where it comes from, where it's like, you just had no idea kind of how to do it or how to like do it professionally, as a lot of kids do. So I was like, this is BS. There's a lot of kids that are getting the pass who could like have a lot of opportunities open to them and have just like a more affordable college ride. So then I left school after my sophomore year and took a semester off. I also got a raging case of mono. So I was like, I ran the SF marathon with it. So I was like kind of unable to like move really in the basement of my parents' house in Minnesota. And I wrote this college application guide after like emailing like 300 high school counselors. But like, how can we like, what are the problems you're seeing with kids in this area applying to college? And they listed them out there for some pretty consistent things. And then I was like, wow, like this is super interesting. Let's see what we can do. So I wrote a guide, sent it out that fall to about, I think, 3 states counselors, and the feedback was phenomenal. So I think it was like 15,000 public educators or something got it or something, or like 15,000 kids got it or something. And the feedback was amazing. And the next year, I came back to school and we basically started ramping it up. And that's where like it became this national sort of thing. Right. In addition, we started ramping up Summer Playbook. So what happened then was that I was in college. Things are great. I came in chemistry. I switched to CS, and then I switched to sociology because I really liked the questions of sociology. And then I did like a minor in CS, and I did some stat and some chemistry on the side, which is tight. And then what happened was that because I had taken this semester off to start Fair Op, I had this like weird, awkward, like trailing semester thing. And I don't know if you've read, Alex, that poem like by T.S. Eliot, where it's like the world doesn't end with a bang but a whimper. But that kind of felt like how it would feel like graduating the winter. So I was like, I'm going to take this semester off and like do something interesting. So and then graduate in spring. Well, what happened was that I was running this research grant in Southeast Asia on human trafficking, which is very sad. But I was out there and I was also applying to fellowships and also YC, which I had no idea what it was at the moment. Right. And that's changed in terms of people knowing what it is. And I got the text, one, in a Thai surf shop that I was in final rounds for the Schwartzman interview, which was great for Schwartzman scholarship. And then I got the email that we were shortlisted for YC, meaning we fly out there while I was in Vietnam. And so I was like, oh man, I got to get back. So I finished the research. I flew back. I slept in an abandoned dorm room at Harvard. And then basically it was a crazy week. We're both worked out. And so basically it was like, well, Jan 1 was when I was going to go back to school. Yeah. But Jan 1, I was sleeping on the ground of our newfound office in California with a
Uh-huh.
bunch of packing boxes around me, basically setting up the shop. And now that was about 2.5 years ago. So what happened then was that we built this app from scratch called Play Like Get Offline, which is all about getting people to hang out offline and in person. Um, we launched it at Harvard. We had great numbers. We raised our round. We had some amazing investors, great people. We found out that that didn't have the retention we wanted. And then we basically went into the swamp of like just looking for new products, which is a difficult swamp if you're ever been in this position. And so we built this thing that was like a Discord for college students for the following 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then we found that didn't really work out, which is
Dang.
just lifestyle, consumer social.
Yeah.
And then what we did is then we started poking around in different areas. So we poked around in like enterprise, we poked around with like trains, freight trains, we poked around all these different things. And that kind of brings us to now, where what we're working on now is we've actually created this like, we built this thing called FanWave, which was basically a way that you could talk with your favorite creator. And so like you could like say like, hey, I want to talk to Casey Neistat, and like put a bid down to get a surprise call from Casey Neistat, and Casey Neistat calls you, which is really fun. But we
Wow.
found out that TikTokers want to talk to each other. So
Hmm.
what we've been rolling out now, we actually just released this the other week, is this app that, and we're keeping it on the DL, but this app, we're basically, we're connecting all these TikTokers together,
Oh,
which is kind of
interesting.
fun because they want to meet each other and they're all kind of the same age and they're doing really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But TikTok really doesn't have a place to have community on it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's been kind of the journey in a nutshell. As you can see, it's been a wild one, and
Yeah.
definitely some learnings along the way, but kind of that's like the overview.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really interesting overview because I feel like you could go into depth in so many places there.
It's been a
Um,
full life, yeah, so far at least.
yeah, and you're not even 30, are you?
I'm 25, and
Nice. Nice.
I gotta tell you, I think the thing that aged me the most was, but in a beautiful way, was
Mm-hmm.
I was dating this girl that I really, really cared about last year, and I think when you date someone seriously, that's when you really start to feel the age, because you're like, oh man, like where am I gonna live? Or like you
Yeah.
start thinking about the kids thing. You're like, I gotta put money on
Oh,
the
okay.
table, like that, or at least contribute to that,
Right.
etc. And so it's like, I think that that's a really, I think there's certain things that age you or just make
Mm-hmm.
you feel more mature. I think that's one of them. But yeah, I just was talking to my mom the other day, and I was like, Mom, I'm pretty young, man. Like this is, sometimes I forget this. Sometimes I feel like I'm 40.
Yeah.
Luckily, my knees don't feel like that, but despite the running. But yeah, that's the kind of the fun thing, is to be young and still be exploring, and still be checking stuff out.
Hey, and that's cool that you and your mom are so close. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, we were talking about how it's crazy to think that some people never have that really big support system in their life, and that's awesome
Yeah,
that you're really close to your mom.
yeah,
Um, One pattern that I was just thinking about is like I was talking to this guy who wrote at Princeton last week, and he was
cool.
saying, and he was saying that when you get into an Ivy League school, from the outside, it looks like it's this conveyor belt where there's so much opportunity that you're bound to end up on the other side with, like a changed person.
Well,
Like,
I think like on universities, like I think they're kind of just like gyms. Like
huh?
you get in there, you got the equipment, you have some great trainers, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's up to you to like get out there and like work out. And
Huh?
I think also like if you do want to really push the envelope,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you got to make your own program, right? Like so, like
Totally.
especially in the things where you're creating new things, your entire value is you creating new things if you're in that space, which can be a very demoralizing and brutal space because, I mean, I'm sure you know with this podcast, people conflate you with your creations, right? It's hard to separate the
Mhm.
artist and what you create. So I think like, yeah, I think it takes a special breed to just kind of get in there and, take risks and take shots. I think the other thing that can happen is that it is, in many ways, it's such an awesome opportunity that it can leave you in a feeling of paralysis,
Mhm.
because there's so many options, so many things you can do, that it's hard to narrow in. And I think
Totally.
that's where it just really gets down to doing the things that you think are cool.
Yeah.
And there's some good ways to figure that out. I found that what I found is like good indicators of things that I should try out are things that I see other people doing that I think are really cool.
Hmm.
where I'm like, oh wow, I really think that's awesome that person's doing that,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, oh sweet, like maybe that's something I should check out, like
Hmm.
and I think that's a good guide, and that can be like someone getting up really early, that could be them reading a lot, that could be them doing like a certain class or whatever.
Hmm.
But I think that at the end of the day, you gotta, I think like it's rare that you find a person that you like everything about them, but I think there's something to like in everybody. And you just gotta let everyone be your teacher, to kind of like butcher the Confucian line, and just be like, I like what this person's doing, I like what that person's doing. And then you kind of learn. And that's the nice thing about, that's truly the nice thing about the Ivy League is, or just like universities or anything, anywhere where people just want to show up
Hmm.
is, and not everyone wants to show up like this in the Ivy League for sure, but it's just like seeing people who like are down to work out, like to use the gym analogy. You look around,
Yeah.
they're in there getting shredded, and you're like, dang, I want to do that. That's awesome.
Hmm.
And when you have that kind of vibe, it's hard. You have to try. It's like the energy's there, and it's just way more fun to do.
Hmm.
So I think that's the big blessing of them. But I do think like within that subset, you got to find people who like are doing the things you think are cool. For me, it's startups. Like I think startups are really cool, but I think at a deeper level, it's not startups. I think it's just creating interesting things and doing novel things and
Hmm.
finding new ways to solve problems. And I think increasingly that group of people is not doing the traditional path. Like I know a lot of people who have either left school like I did, although Harvard calls it a leave of absence, or or like for example, like a lot of even these high school hackers, dude, like they're just super innovative, really interesting, really cool. I met like yeah, I met like a 50-year-old lady too the other day. He was like trying some new stuff she never tried before, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I just think that's awesome, and I don't care whether that's like making a new type of recipe or going on a new running route, or just I think that attitude of exploring and learning new things and adventure, that's what I think keeps you young. And I think
Yeah.
that's like the cool things to be kind of around.
Cultivating that vibe of like passion and stuff. Like there was this Crimson article, and it was kind of described you as, it was like there, no cynicism, like absent of cynicism or something like that. Um, Cultivating that vibe, and everyone wants to cultivate their vibe. And is that something you've put effort into?
It's so funny. So I think what's interesting is that Crimson article was very generous, or maybe not generous, depending how you see it. But I think that like I think you just got to be good to everybody, and like
Mhm.
everyone's got their own hurt or pain or things they're going through, and you just got to meet people on their journey and just be like, yeah, what's good. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's just kind of a Midwestern Minnesota kind of vibe.
Totally.
Um, what's I think being the lack of cynicism, I don't think I'm a cynic, but I am pragmatic. And you have to be when you're building social things,
Right.
because you can't gloss over how people actually optimize or think about things.
Hmm.
And for me, who's kind of like a kumbaya idealist kind of dude, sometimes that's hard. Like I hate
Yeah.
putting people on wait lists. I hate people like trying to like do like these like things that people really care about and really think are actually cool. But I
Hmm.
hate doing it because I just wish everyone could like chill and like you know I just wish things would work out. But I think at the end of the day, you have to have good intentions, great intentions, but then you have to also have the ability to recognize how the mechanics are working to get to the outcome you want.
Right.
um, and a lot of that goes into like for example seeing summer playbook. So summer playbook's cool because it really does for a while there, um, and not this summer because we like put it on pause for COVID, but it
Right.
connects connects the world's youth like all around the world. It's pretty awesome. All these kids traveling and like over their summer breaks. It's a really beautiful product. It's amazing. But to make that work, you gotta like there's a lot of ways that you can't just roll by with like optimism itself. Like you have to really think about how people actually behave and use it. But I don't know. I think the vibe, I was on a plane once and I was talking to this guy. He's doing music over at Berkeley Music in Boston,
Cool.
and he's a drummer, really cool guy. And I was like, he doesn't know I tell this story. I tell a story all the time, but we were talking about vibing with music, and he was like, yeah, man, somebody just vibe with a song, and I was like, yeah, I feel it. And I was like, well, what do you think about people? And
Hmm.
he's like, yeah, sometimes you just vibe with people. And I was like, well, I got some people in my life where I'm kind of like a little off key with. Where like I really want to vibe with them. I think it'd be cool if I could vibe. But I just don't feel the vibe.
Hmm.
And he's like, hey man, you ain't vibing. You ain't vibing. You can't force the vibe. And like, I think that's just like a great standard, which is like, be cool to everyone, be nice to everyone, treat them with respect and courtesy. But at the end of the day, you know, you don't have to love them. And the fact here too is, I think for people who I do like have some issue with, or I do like not wouldn't want to spend my time with, there's always something to appreciate in someone, honestly. And if you can't see that, like, if you can't see that in someone or what they can teach you, you're not thinking creatively enough about it. And so, like, at the end of the day, like, it's just like, it's up to you to kind of make your world what it is in a way, and to see the good in people in both in also situation.
Yeah, and speaking about it, like, well, when you came to Harvard, being a guy from the Midwest, how did you fit in? Did you find a group of goons like you did in Minnesota?
I think people just had, well, yeah, there's definitely, there's some great people out here, but I think a lot of people just had no idea what to do with me. They just saw this kid like bounding out, who had a lot of energy. It still, hopefully still has. And although I only drink decaf, and
Okay.
like I got to keep it mellow. But yeah, I think they just had no idea. Like I think a lot of people too, especially those New Yorkers, we love them. We love those New Yorkers. But I think when you're living in a big city, when people are nice to you, you're a little bit like, why? Yeah, it's like kind of strange. You're like, oh, why is that person waving and smiling at me? And you're like, oh, just say hey, yeah, you just hey. And I get it. Like, now living in a big city for a while, you can't say hey or nod or smile at everyone.
Right.
So I get where they're coming from too. But I thought it was wild. Also, I think at Harvard, so I came from like a public school in rural Minnesota. I remember, it's kind of funny. So we moved our office back here about a year or so into after raising money on the West Coast, just to be around more college students so we could ship these products. I remember I snuck into an intro Chinese class. I was like on time off. I just snuck in and just like wanted to check it out because I love learning. It was like at 9 a.m. Roth, my co-founder, was sleeping because he's on the engineer life, right? And I was like, I'm just gonna sneak in here. And dude, I'll never forget, freshman class, easiest level of Chinese you'd be in. The question came up, how many of you have taken Chinese before? And everyone, except for me and a kid from North Dakota, raised their hand. And I was like, dude, this sucks. And then there was this lady I remember who's on her phone, just texted, like, look a little hungover or whatever. And teacher's like just rolling through like numbers in Mandarin. And she's like points to the lady and says, hey, can you recite these back to me? And the lady, without looking up from her phone, nails all of them. And I'm like, dude, this is messed up. Yeah. Because she'd taken the class already. And I was like, dude, this is messed up. So I think it's a little bit of both. But I think the good thing is that it really taught me how to take a punch. Because if you ever want to do something that's creative or interesting or just unique, you need to know how to take some punches. And boy, if you're doing consumer social, you really need to learn how to take a lot of punches.
It's hard to find you're in, right?
Yeah, well, it's just like you gotta get used to taking a punch so you don't get discouraged with what you're doing. Because when you're putting out new stuff, it's going to be critiqued. It's not going to be perfect. But I think the experience I had at Harvard was one where it was constantly challenging in a way where I usually felt like the underdog. And I think that's just kind of a mindset I have where I'm usually just the underdog. It was a great education in that. But it was definitely wild coming from like rural Minnesota. Yeah. And just like all of a sudden like playing D1 academics, if you will, and getting schooled. But you know what? Hey, you hold in there, you go to practice, you get better, and things worked out.
Big analogy guy.
Yeah, I love him.
Hey, me too, but and I don't want to run the clock.
No worries.
We're over 30. Do you have anything to get to?
No, I got 10. I got 10 minutes.
All right, that's sweet. One thing I wanted to touch on was your Midwestern city revival thesis that you were working on before you left before you finished that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That is an interesting thesis research project because it just seems like a very difficult thing to research about. How did you get that started?
Yeah, so growing up in Minnesota, we had we have Minneapolis Twin Cities, which has at one point, well, it has a lot. So it has a lot of bio companies in the Twin Cities. But the question is like that I always had was, why isn't Minneapolis has some of these best Target there too that's investing a lot. It has the Mayo Clinic. Why is this why is this cluster? Why isn't this like a San Diego or an SF or a Boston where like where I think it's 70% of the public listed bio companies are in? And but my thought is like, well, how do you, being from the Midwest, how do you make these cities? How do you like find and just add to the stride in their step? How do we help people do better? How do we help entire communities do better? And how do we like bring this energy to a place like St. Louis or Minneapolis or Des Moines? Des Moines has lots of cool stuff going on too. All these cities have cool stuff going on. But how do we just add to it? And I think that question's super interesting because at the end of the day, like, I think that the ideal world is where people have opportunity to become who they want to be. And I think that when you have strong industry in areas, you have that. You have investment in the public sector. You have the ability to get a good paying job. And I think it's one of the most important questions out there. So that's actually also a big reason why I got corrupted into sociology, because it provided the ability to study some of these things. And it also fits neatly into, I think, some of my past stuff I built, which is like Fair Opportunity Project, the EdTech, because like I think kids shouldn't come down to where you're born, your ability to pay, or like who you're born to be able to attend and afford college. There should be more choice and freedom there. And I also think the same is like with summer playbook. We're like at its root, we just wanted to make, because kids crash with each other on the platform, we just wanted to make travel more affordable so that it was more accessible for people from all backgrounds. So that's what got me into it. And I don't know, like if I were to ever go back to school, that's something that I think would be cool to pick up. But I don't know, there's so much to learn. There's so much to explore. And so I feel like it's kind of like a mystery box where you can just choose so many different adventures that, you just, why not choose a couple? Like it's kind of fun. I think the best way to think about that is, what's a problem that I want to solve? And also, what's a problem that I think is cool to solve? Because and then, I think also my opinion is that at this age, you should build the failed social consumer startup. Like you should build like the world changing thing that doesn't work or whatever. Because if not you, how can you punt that to the person who's like 35, who's like now trying to sell into business and like wants to he's asking that other question, which is, how do I make the most money as fast as possible? Right. And that's like, I don't know. I think that's also a very interesting question and one that you need to ask. But at the end of the day, like at this age and like in certain spaces, like you should just build something that's awesome and like cool. And like try to have an impact and try to make something that you'd be happy to see the world have. And I feel like too often, and I feel like this is again like just being cool, being yourself in these environments. Sometimes that question gets left aside. How do you just make money? And that's great. I mean, making money means that you're exchanging a service to someone and they care about it enough that they'll pay you. So you're adding value. That's epic. But I think also it's just, there's a little bit of a flavor of like just the founder here, which is like, well, what do you think is cool to build? And for me, a lot of it's like connecting people. I think connecting people is super cool. And so for us, when we're building something like this TikTok app, where basically we basically bring TikTokers together and they can chat with each other there, that's super exciting because it's like all these creators who never would have met each other otherwise, or might have, but we just do it in like a cooler, better, faster way. And at the end of the day, if you have something that has retention and that has value, the cool thing about technology is that there's plenty of ways to make money from it. You can do ads, you can do subscriptions. I mean, on the App Store, I think Tinder is the highest grossing app. I think like each, like it's just making money. And it's been the days, like in this case, people want to meet other people. It's a free service, but then they built something that was awesome, but then you can just like layer on top of it. But it's just it's a scary space to be in because it's a foreign type of business model to what a lot of people have seen or have experienced. But that's where there is a point of arbitrage, whereas if you understand it, I mean, some of the most valuable companies in the world today are largely driven by social networks. So if you understand it, you're in a very good place.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I never really thought about it like that. Investors, like if you pitch to a panel of fake investors, they're always like, how are you going to make your money? But I mean, it's tough because social networks are so different than other types of business models.
Yeah, they really are. And I think I think like some great questions to ask yourself when you're building social networks are, how do I make my users awesome? Like, how do I let them make new content? How do I make them meet new people? How do I give them more choice? How do I save them money? How do I make them money, right?
Yeah.
And if you have a way that you can like make your users awesome, man, that's a lot of value. And just people think about making money. Instead, this is a Paul Grahamism. There's like the YC founder, but like I think the idea this from Paul is like the example here is you should think about ways to add value, because if you can just add value to people's lives in terms of just like giving them more choice, saving them money, helping them have new experiences, new connections, new thoughts, man, that is super valuable. And there's usually a way to capture some of it.
Yeah.
But it takes some creativity to get there.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. And some patience.
And some patience. And to be able to take a lot of punches.
Hey, you made it all the way through. Hope you enjoyed it. It was really interesting. Luke was a great guest. And if you want to hear more stories or just hear more episodes like this, go to theboardstudent.com and put your email in there and you can get on our newsletter. Every week we send out a newsletter that contains the podcast episode and some other content from college students that are branching out, doing what excites them and accomplishing their goals. All right, take care.